What's up, Rebel Nation? It's Cam Wicker from the Rebel Walk, co-host of the podcast that you're tuned into right now, the Rebel Talk. In this week's episode, Zach and I are finally back in front of the screen to talk a little bit of Ole Miss sports over the past week or so. We start off talking about Ole Miss men's basketball and what they've done in the portal since the last time we spoke with you, and also just their roster in general heading into the summer. After that, we talk a little bit about Ole Miss softball. Softball has not been discussed a ton on this podcast throughout the season, but Ole Miss softball has done some really good things down the stretch of the season so far, winning the regional in Tucson over Arizona in the final, heading to the super regional in Fayetteville to face Arkansas for the first time since 2019. After that, we talk a little bit about Ole Miss baseball and how they'll be preparing for the SEC tournament this coming week when they play on Wednesday against the winner of either Florida or South Carolina. Ole Miss is also in the host discussion, and we talk a little bit about what Ole Miss needs to host a regional in Oxford. With that being said, leave a like at the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment below, and enjoy the show. Welcome back, Rebel fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with Zach Moretz. Today, we're here to talk about a little bit of Ole Miss sports just throughout the past week. Big sports matchups coming up this weekend for baseball, softball, big stuff happening in basketball. Not a lot of stuff happening in football, not a lot of stuff happening in women's basketball right now. So we'll talk mainly men's basketball here to start. We'll talk a little of softball, talk a little bit of baseball today. It's been a little while since me and Zach have been on the podcast with you guys. It's been a little hectic for both of us, end of the school year, taking finals. I graduated from the University of Mississippi this past week, I guess. So it's been flying by these past couple of weeks. So it's been a little hectic. So our apologies for not being able to get to you guys, but we're back here in front of the screen today, talk a little bit of Ole Miss sports. And it's been pretty exciting here, to say the least, Zach, down the stretch for Ole Miss sports. I mean, just not even the major sports. I mean, Ole Miss golf is in a tournament right now, and they're one of the top teams in the country performing out there in the golf tournament right now. So Ole Miss softball is really competing right now more than most people thought they were going to compete. I mean, they're getting their new stadium built throughout most of the school year, and people don't even really think that Ole Miss softball has a great program. Next thing you know, they're 40 wins in the playoffs right now. They're in the supers. Ole Miss baseball is at the bottom of expectations out of all the sports programs here at Ole Miss, and they come in and win almost 40 games this year. They finished 7th in the SEC, above Tennessee. So if Andrew Fisher or Liam Dool is out there, you left to finish lower than Ole Miss. I mean, that's what I've been seeing on social media all throughout this past couple weeks, past couple days since the end of the SEC standings, Zach. That's been what I've been seeing the most. What have you been seeing the most at Ole Miss sports so far?
I want to start with the whole Tennessee dilemma, because these guys, man, when they played at Ole Miss, Andrew Fisher and Liam Doyle were like stand-up dudes. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an Ole Miss guy. And I think you can agree with me there, Cam, but I'm showing my family a video the other week. Andrew Fisher, it's game 3 against Vanderbilt. He hits a homer, and he's individually taunting every single Vanderbilt infielder. And I'm sitting there like, dude, it's like the second, third inning of the game. And then you fast forward a couple hours and they lose. It made my night. It made my weekend. I don't know what it is about the culture at Tennessee. I'm clearly not a huge fan of it, and I think it's hysterical that they left for essentially the same end product. I know they both took steps forward and are going to be high picks in the draft, which, it's hard for me to say that, but they're both good players. I do think that's hysterical, though, Cam. They're just bouncing back here just to regroup. Huge congrats to Cam for those that are listening. It's awesome that he graduated. And I apologize that we're back to the green screen setup. I'm here in Chicago in my basement. So if you hear a dog barking, also we'll try and ignore that. But like you said, dude, really exciting stuff and an exciting time for Ole Miss here. We want to touch on basketball here quickly. I think, the most recent transfer that we didn't really touch on, Cam, was the addition of James Scott, who's a huge addition from Louisville. He's a guy who can kind of mix and match into that 3 and 4 spot, even though he's 6'11", and he can also be that true center as well. And you pair that with Malik Dia, Corey Chest, and this freshman Tyler Jordan that's coming in. I think it's going to be an incredible rotation. The question mark that we kind of discussed before the podcast is that point guard / wing scorer role. And I'm going to butcher his name. Cam will get you guys his name in a minute. The kid from France, we're going to refer to him as, can absolutely handle the ball. Looks like he can score pretty well too. And then Corin Johnson's coming in from Louisville, coming off injury there. Patton Pinkins is a true freshman. And also Duke Klafke, baby. The Brazilian's running it back. So you hope to see him take a step forward offensively, but he's going to get, really a lot of energy coming off that defensive side of the ball. But just your overall thoughts of the Porter Hall from Chris Beard and what else is Ole Miss missing that they may need heading into next season, Cam?
Absolutely. And you nailed it on the head. Ole Miss is looking for a guard, looking for a point guard role. I mean, are they going to add another guy? Are they going to rely on this team that they have right now? We'll talk a little bit more about this roster and what it looks like. But it's Elias Carmodine. I maybe don't say it as good as the French announcers do that I've watched on those highlights, but I believe it's Elias Carmodine. If you haven't watched any tape on this guy, haven't watched any highlights on this guy, he's a baller, man. I mean, I know he's young and he's coming right out of technically be a freshman. I believe he's in his 20s though, right, Zach?
Yeah, he's an old dude.
Yeah, he's an older guy, so he'll be a freshman. Will be like that Chad Baker Mazzara type of situation where he's an older guy in college as a freshman, and he'll be here at Ole Miss next year for Ole Miss basketball. But if you haven't watched the film, I mean, go watch it, man. The first clip I saw of this guy, as soon as I clicked on the highlight video, he dunks on a guy, and the next play he's on the back pass. I mean, he seems a little flashy. He seems like he's got that flashiness to him. He's got that paint mentality where he drives in the paint and scores. Doesn't look like much of a shooter. I don't see him shoot a lot in his highlights. So we'll have to see if Ole Miss can find some other players that are going to shoot on that wing spot and that guard spot, which we talked about it pretty much all season. Klafke just kind of needs a little bit of confidence. That's all he kind of lacks right now. That's all he kind of lacked a little bit last year. I mean, you talked about it playing against them at the Turner Center and stuff. I mean, obviously you want the college basketball player to show up and score all the points, but the fact that he can show up and score all the points in a rec league game, that shows you how good he can be. He just needs a little bit of confidence. I mean, anything you hear about Klafke, he's a lights out shooter. And I mean, pairing him with other guys on this team, like Corin Johnson, like AJ Storr, who are going to be shooters as well. I mean, even Travis Perry coming in from Kentucky, he's pretty much strictly going to be a shooter for this team on the wing, playing defense for this team. It seems like Chris Beard's kind of got his crew together right now. Maybe he goes and picks up another guard or so. But after that James Scott landing for pretty much completing that front court, obviously you got Malik Dia, you got Corey Chest as well, you got Tyler Jordan coming in. It's going to be exciting to see what Ole Miss is going to do in that front court area. I think the really thing that they're lacking right now is a big name in that front court. But you're hoping, like we've talked about in other podcasts, you're hoping that Malik Dia is going to take big strides forward this year. I mean, like I said, I've talked to a lot of other people about this, maybe even Zach about this as well. If Dia can be somewhat of, a 16, 17 point per game scorer, 8 to 7 rebounds a game, I mean, you can't really ask for much more. You kind of just got to hope that everyone else kind of comes together. And I think that's what this Ole Miss team is kind of looking forward to next year, hoping that all these young pieces, because, I mean, in the 2 years with Chris Beard, he's put two pretty old teams together that he's had to rebuild the next year. This is a fairly young team that he's put together.
Absolutely.
A couple sophomores, a couple freshmen, a couple guys that have more years of eligibility left to play, with the exception of Storr and Johnson and Malik Dia. The rest of these guys on this roster next year will have multiple years of eligibility. And I know it's hard to say in college basketball that guys are going to stick around, but if you're Chris Beard and you're the Ole Miss program right now, you got a young core right now, and maybe you're not going to reach the Sweet 16 like you did last year. Maybe that's going to be a disappointment to some of the fans if you don't do that, but you know that you're on the way up. Because even looking earlier today, I was looking at the recruiting rankings. I mean, Tyler Jordan and Patton Pinkins are the two of the top 5 recruits this program's ever had. This is a different era for Ole Miss basketball, and Chris Beard's only going to do more the more the years build up for him here at Ole Miss.
You touched on Dia there. I truly believe, and it's not because we had him on the pod, guys. I know there's some bias there, obviously, but if you go and you go listen to that podcast, all he talked about was how much he really loves the game of basketball. And for those that follow him on social media, this dude has been in the lab like every single day this summer. You could tell he cares, and he definitely, is proud of that decision to come back to Ole Miss. And he's surrounded, in no disrespect to last year's team, but in my opinion, there's a lot more size, athleticism, and overall skill. And that's just purely skill, right? Last year's team had a lot of great chemistry and things that aren't going to be, rewritten into this year's team. But I can tell you right now, there are a lot more skilled, talented players with higher upsides who are going to get, quite honestly, possibly drafted in the NBA. So you pair Malik Dia with his work ethic and the abundance of skill that he's going to be surrounded by, especially, down in the post, whether it's with James Scott, Corey Chester, AJ Storr. I think he really turns into that breakout season and starts scoring 15 and plus points a game. So I'm excited about Malik. And then the final guy I want to touch on is Nico Bundalo. He's a 2025 high school guy for those who haven't heard. He was in Oxford the other day for a visit. He was previously committed to Washington. He's now decommitted. And he would be the highest high school ranked recruit maybe ever in the program, Cam. I think
I believe so. I believe it'll be pretty close to Matt Morrell.
Yeah, I think he's ranked basically a top 30 player on every single site. He plays at a prep school. I think it's called Prolific Prep.
Yeah.
Great name. Shout out to that school in California, but an absolute beast. He reminds me, I don't want to say draw a Cooper Flag comparison because he's uncomparable, but he's a white kid who's an absolute dog, and he's 6'10". And the thing that stands out about me that makes me talk about Flag is his ability to score, honestly, at will. He can shoot a three. Despite being 6'10", he can shoot. He can get down in the post. He can ball handle. So this is another guy who will come in and I think immediately slide into that 3-4 spot for Chris Beard. So keep your eyes out for Nico Bundalo. We hope he commits here in the next couple days, maybe weeks, but definitely a recruitment to keep your eyes out for.
Absolutely. Like Zach said, it's a top 40 recruit. If you look at the 2025 ranks right now, he's the only guy really uncommitted out of the top prospects after decommitting from Washington. So that'll be a big landing for Ole Miss. Obviously, he'll come to campus pretty soon if he commits. And I haven't watched a ton of film on Bundalo, but like Zach said, he seems like a really good ball handler. He's got that typical build that a lot of NBA players have now, that tall, slender build that a lot of guys are just, stretch bigs now in the NBA. They're 6'10", 6'9", handling the ball, getting rebounds, getting assists. Nikola Jokic kind of paved the way for a new generation of basketball players, and that's the type of guy that Nico Bundalo is. Not saying that he's a Nikola Jokic level of basketball player, but he's that type of skill level. He's going to bring that type of skill level to the game, and that's something that Ole Miss would be more than willing to add to their roster. I mean, if you think of guys that did like that for Ole Miss last year, Jamin Brakefield didn't necessarily do it to a crazy level, but he kind of did that, do it all for Ole Miss last year. And if Chris Beard can get his hands on guys that can do everything, he's going to go after those guys. So keep an eye out for that name. Keep an eye out for anything that TJ Oxley from the Rebel Walk posts on social media about college basketball. He's all over that stuff. Keep an eye out for Rebel Walk. They're always posting stuff about college basketball too, as far as covering Ole Miss. So just make sure to keep up with all that. Like Zach said, we're hoping for a commit from Nico Bundalo soon. I think that's all we got for college basketball side of things. With that, I want to hop in to something that we hadn't talked much about all year, and that's Ole Miss softball. We talked a little bit about it early in the season, about when the season first started, when the Ole Miss Rebels were pretty hot to start the season for Ole Miss softball. Obviously, SEC play is the brutal gauntlet that it is, and Ole Miss had to go through that. Fell in the ranks a little bit. I'm not sure. I think they finished. I know at the end of the season they were around that 20 to 25 range ranked. I don't know if they finished the season ranked. I'm not sure. Not quite sure off the top of my head, but this is a team that's really been scraping and crawling all year to just find wins, try to find ways to get into a host spot. They didn't end up getting into a host spot. They got a 2 seed. They were sent out to Tucson. And if you're an Ole Miss fan or you've been watching Ole Miss for the past couple of years, you know that Ole Miss kind of has their good things happening when they go down to Tucson or face Arizona in sports recently. I mean, I know Ole Miss baseball had a sad ending to the season. What was it, a couple years ago in 2021 where they lost in Tucson? But since then, Ole Miss has kind of owned Arizona, and that's exactly what Ole Miss softball did when they went down to Tucson. They did lose one game, the first game of the final, and they had to play the second game. But it seemed like all weekend, it seemed that every time I turned on the channel, this Ole Miss team was raking. They seemed like they were locked in the whole time. This is an Ole Miss team that doesn't hit a lot of home runs. If you look at the stats in softball throughout the year in SEC, they didn't hit a lot of home runs this year. They don't have a lot of double-digit home run hitters, but the ones they do have, Lexi Brady set a single-season program record at Ole Miss, hitting her 16th home run during that regional. They have Aaliyah Benford, who's kind of like the Shohei Ohtani of college baseball at this point. She's got 11 home runs. She pitches on the weekends for Ole Miss as well. She plays third base. She does it all for Ole Miss. She had 2 big home runs during their final game to win the whole thing, and then had 3 home runs during that entire day on the final. They also have a handful of freshmen on that team. Percy Yamas had a big weekend in Tucson. Mackenzie Pickens had a big year all season. She had a big weekend in Tucson as well. And then Mia Guachino, the pitcher who's been outstanding for Ole Miss all year, she's almost got 200 strikeouts on the year. This is an Ole Miss softball team that maybe not a lot of people had their eyes on to start the year, whether that be Ole Miss fans or college softball fans. I know for certain on my end, no knock on college softball. I don't watch a ton of college softball until playoff time rolls around. But this is an Ole Miss team that I've kept my eye on all year just because they seem like they were going to be good. And this was more than what you'd ask for from an Ole Miss softball team that haven't been in this situation in a while. I mean, this is Jamie Traskell's, I think, 5th or 6th year coaching at Ole Miss. She hasn't been to a super regional. It seemed like she was kind of on the hot seat there for a little while. This season they came to play. They get 40 wins for the first time in 2 years. And then she makes a super regional for the first time since 2019 with this program. So I think this Ole Miss softball team is on the way up, and we'll have to see what they do this weekend in Fayetteville, Zach.
Absolutely. I don't have much here, Cam. Unfortunately, I wasn't really following them for a majority of the season, and that's not a knock to them. There's just a lot going on in the spring. But wow, you turn on your TV, you check your social media, and it's another Ole Miss sports team that is going crazy in the postseason. Credit to Keith Carter for making it seemingly a really underrated hire that paid off after a few years there, and an Ole Miss team who, like you said, didn't have the best season in SEC play, gets that 2 seed. They go to Tucson, and look at that. We play the little brother of Ole Miss in baseball and softball now, apparently. So huge win over Arizona. I want to say our boss Evie sent us a stat. It was something along the lines that Arizona hadn't gone to a super regional in softball in maybe like 15 years or something, Cam?
Yeah.
Something pretty ridiculous. So to prevent them from staying out and kind of taking their spot is awesome. So everyone keep your eyes peeled for them. But again, all credit in the world to Ole Miss softball.
Absolutely. And keep an eye out for them. Like I said, they'll be heading to Fayetteville this coming up weekend in a super. It's kind of crazy to think if Ole Miss softball ever was able to host a super regional at any point coming up in the couple of years or just in the near future, Ole Miss baseball would have also an opportunity to host a regional during that same time in Oxford. That'd be 2 major teams hosting a regional in Oxford. I talked with Sam Hutchins at the Clarion Ledger about that. Shout out to Sam. He previously reported at Oklahoma State, and he said that once happened at Oklahoma State, and their stadiums are right beside each other. So just imagine all the hectic stuff that'd be going on in Oxford that weekend. How many people would be in Oxford for that? I mean, I know Ole Miss softball hasn't had a lot of traction from the fans lately, but like I said, this is something that you got to watch out for. Just like Ole Miss women's basketball, it didn't have a lot of traction. Coach Joe comes in, builds up the program, and now Ole Miss basketball is considered one of the best programs on campus. This Ole Miss softball team can do just that, and I think they are on the way up with the way that they're going right now. I think that's all we got on the softball side of things. My apologies again. We didn't have a lot prepared on that side. We didn't watch a lot of those games throughout the season, but we're watching them now. We're watching that Ole Miss softball team now. So moving into baseball now, it's been hectic though on the baseball side. I mean, you start the year really good. It seemed like you're kind of reeling there at the middle of the season, and then you end the year pretty solid. I mean, this Ole Miss team won 5 series. They lost 5 series. You kind of wish that you won that South Carolina series to end the year. Kind of wish that you won that Mississippi State series to end the year. And if those 2 series were won, by this Ole Miss baseball team, there's no doubt a lock for a host spot. I mean, this is a 16-14 Ole Miss baseball team. They would be a lock if they had 18-19 wins. The fact that they're in the spot they are right now, after being picked to finish 15th at the start of the year, is more than what these Ole Miss fans expected. And I just want your overall thoughts on what you think, on what you thought about this Ole Miss baseball team, Zach, and the way that they finished the year.
Yeah, it feels like I don't want to say peaking at the right time, but there are some guys doing some really good things, and it happens to be at the perfect time of the season. You want to look at Hunter Elliott, who's absolutely been shoving recently. I think he goes 7 innings, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts, and no earned runs against an elite Auburn offense the other day. I mean, that's dominant. And those are the guys who have playoff experience who you're going to see thrive here in Hoover and even further in the NCAA tournament. I think there are some other guys offensively, too. You look at whether it's Sanford, Hill, Utermark, or even Furness, those are 4 guys who are continuing to have to elevate their game and be leaders, as they have been for the entire year here at Ole Miss. And then some of the under the radar people who I see making an impact for hitting and on the pitching side of things, Ethan Surowick and Colin Reuter, 2 guys who could be thrown into a pitch hitting situation who Bianco might like to match up more. And we've seen them come in and, be consistently productive. And then on the flip side there on the mound, I think Will McCausland, Walker Hooks, and, Spencer really need to step up. I think McCausland's done a really nice job. Would have liked to see him go in the game Sunday, which I didn't. I listened to Mike's interview. I guess they used him too much in the bullpen for warm-ups the other night. Come on now, fellas. That probably can't happen in the playoffs. If McCausland's pitching well in games and in a given weekend, he's got to go in there in that Sunday game. So would have loved to see that. I think Hooks and Spencer need to step it up a little bit because they're going to get innings. I don't know how much we can utilize Ryan Rodriguez, a guy who's, no disrespect, he just seems to be a little bit inconsistent. And then I think you look at this, I want to dive right into the host debate here, Cam. You have series wins against the following teams who, in majority of the polls, are ranked above Ole Miss. Florida, who's on an absolute tear right now, Vanderbilt, Auburn, and an individual win against Clemson. I want to say Ole Miss is maybe top 3 in the country in quad one wins. They've played some extremely talented teams. And to me, right now I do believe, obviously, as having Ole Miss bias, that we have earned that host spot playing in the SEC, especially compared to teams who haven't played in the SEC. But my point being, you play against Florida or South Carolina here on Wednesday and you win. I think that shuts down the conversation, locks up the spot. But who knows, man? Florida's playing out of their minds right now. But that's kind of my take on the host situation. I don't know if it's going to come to fruition, but definitely, interested to see what you have to say here, Cam.
Absolutely. And the host situation always comes down to the RPI in college baseball. I don't look at the RPI much in college basketball or college football anymore, but the RPI means a lot in college baseball. And then the quad one wins have kind of come into factor in college baseball, just like they have come into factor in college basketball. Maybe not the weight that they hold in college basketball as much as they hold in college baseball, but in college baseball, Ole Miss is second in the country in quad one wins. The only more quad one wins in the country are Texas with 17. Texas was a team that beat Ole Miss earlier to start the year, and in a game that Ole Miss didn't look good at the beginning of the season. In that the only game that didn't look good at the beginning of the season there on that run that they had in Arlington. But like Zach said, a handful of teams that are in front of Ole Miss, ranked ahead of Ole Miss in the RPI and the rankings, been ranked ahead of Ole Miss all season long. Ole Miss beat them in series. And I think, like Zach said, it's going to come down to that game if Ole Miss ends up facing Florida. I mean, South Carolina could go in there and knock Florida off, but we're going to assume that Florida wins that game against South Carolina and Ole Miss matches up against Florida on Wednesday. That game is going to play a huge factor in probably who the last SEC host is. And you're probably not going to get 13 SEC hosts. Maybe you don't even get 12 just because the committee doesn't want that many hosts in the SEC. But if it does happen and Ole Miss and Florida get in, there's a chance the 13 team gets in, and it's Tennessee or Alabama or who else. Tennessee finished the year pretty bad, so it's kind of hard to say where they're going to end up. The conference tournament is going to play a huge role, and that's what I had circled before this podcast is how important was that conference tournament going to be. And it's going to be important for a handful of teams. Most importantly, Ole Miss, Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama. If any of those teams make a run, they're for sure a lock to host. And I think right now the toss-up right now isn't even Ole Miss and Tennessee. I think the toss-up right now is Ole Miss and Florida out of the SEC teams. There are a few other teams outside of the SEC that are being tossed up in the air as well. UCLA, Georgia Tech, Southern Miss, TCU. Southern Miss, considering the way that they ended the season and the fact that they only lost one weekend series throughout the entire year, I would assume Southern Miss might be safe. The thing is, if Southern Miss is safe and Ole Miss doesn't host, that the committee tends to match those teams together. So Ole Miss may end up going down to Hattiesburg for a regional. And if that's the case, you'll probably have more Ole Miss fans in Hattiesburg than there is Southern Miss fans. Nothing against the Southern Miss fans, but that's just the case most of the time. On the case of UCLA, they have 22 conference wins. Obviously, that's in the Big Ten, but they also have 4 quad 3 losses. And same with Southern Miss. They have 5 quad 4 losses. These are teams that, you're playing we're talking about college basketball. You're losing quad 4 games. You're not making the tournament. I mean, if you're losing quad 4, quad 3 games, you're not making the tournament in college basketball. So, I mean, like I said, college baseball doesn't hold the same weight, but those wins and losses are going to be looked at. Those wins that Ole Miss have over Vanderbilt, over Florida. Even the tough series that they could have won against Arkansas and Tennessee. I mean, Ole Miss is going to get looked at that in those series. Obviously, Ole Miss has a few bad losses. Obviously, the South Alabama loss in the middle of the season in the midweek, and then the Little Rock loss on Kids Day, and then obviously losing the series to South Carolina. The State one doesn't look as bad on you, especially because State's your rival. You went down to Starkville. State's going to make the tournament. It would have looked bad if State would have ended the year in shambles, but shout out to the Bulldogs. They finished the year strong despite losing their head coach. So those guys seemed like they wanted it bad. But this seems like an Ole Miss team that I believe is one win away from hosting, and that starts with beating Florida on Wednesday or South Carolina if you end up playing South Carolina. And then if you go in there on the second day, which I believe if they win on Wednesday, they'll play on Friday. That means you play Arkansas. You already beat Arkansas. You know you can beat Arkansas. If you go in there and beat Arkansas, you're a lock to host. And if you're telling me at the beginning of this season that Ole Miss is going to host, I would have looked at you crazy, because this is a team the past two seasons that have looked nothing short of, I hate to say it, they've looked awful the past 2 years. And this is an Ole Miss team this is an Ole Miss baseball program that is not used to that standard. And I think even this year, with the way that they've impressed and been the way that they have, it's kind of crazy to see the fans at this point in the season not even reflecting on the fact that we're in the playoffs for the first time in 2 years, but we're debating on whether we should host or not. I think that's a good sign for Ole Miss baseball to be back to the way that it should be, and making the playoffs every year and being in that host conversation. And I think if you see Ole Miss hosting, it's probably going to be 13, 14, 15 seed, and you're going to get a tough matchup in a super regional. But we know that this team is more than capable of doing that. This team seems like they have a little bit of fight to them, a little bit of never quit mentality. I know watching that recent season episode, I reported on that in my last article about Ole Miss baseball making the tournament. Coach Bianco said to the team during one of their hitting meetings or whatever team meetings, he said, if you got any more left in the tank, empty it. And it seems like that's what a handful of these Ole Miss players have been starting to do. I mean, you talked about Judd Utermark. He went 7 for 14 in that series against Auburn with 2 home runs and 10 RBIs. He's been really good at the plate. I mean, I know he has high strikeout numbers, but he didn't strike out a lot these past 4 or 5 games of the season. So it seems like he's kind of locking in, taking his pitches. You have other guys like Luke Hill, who's been good all year. You have guys like Mitchell Sanford, who's really impressed all year. You got guys on the pitching staff that you can rely on. It's going to come down to these bullpen arms for Ole Miss. It's going to come down to how many points you can score, because we know this Ole Miss team can score a lot of points. They have a lot of home runs. It's going to come down to scoring runs, and if the bullpen can hold up for Ole Miss. And I think they have a good chance if they can get into that host spot and host in Oxford.
Real quick, Cam, another guy who in my opinion, has the ability to make or break some games down the stretch here is Austin Foley. He struck out a lot more than usual against Auburn. I think he may have only recorded about 1 hit the entire series. But when he's on, man, it's a barrel in the bottom of the lineup who has a chance to tie the game or take the lead in the matter of 1 pitch. And I think a lot of the Ole Miss team can do that. They have the ability to send the ball out of the yard. I think it was one of the first Ole Miss teams to hit, was it like 100 homers or something? Something crazy, Cam.
I think a second time program history with 100 home runs,
Yeah. So these boys can put it out of the yard, and that kind of instills faith in me. Because if you think about so many of those special moments in Omaha, whether it's McCants, Elko, bench, you name it, these guys are sending the baseball into the seats. And it helps a lot, especially in a pitching staff who typically tends to struggle late in games down in that bullpen. But I want to briefly touch on Florida before we wrap up here. 6 straight SEC series wins. They might be the hottest team in the country. We said it on this podcast during the time of the series, but they were injured. They were not the same team who they are down the stretch here. You know that they're going to turn up. Sully's one of the best coaches in the country, and he's developed not only a good offense, but quite some talented pitchers. Aiden King's a starting pitcher who's been really good. Liam Peterson's another guy. I don't know how they're going to approach the SEC tourney. It seems like Liam Peterson or Aiden King might be the starting guy they see. And then another relief pitcher is Billy Barlow, who pitched against Ole Miss twice in Oxford, gave up no earned runs in both appearances. And their catcher, Luke Heyman, dog at the plate. He's hitting about 300, but he is an absolute monster of a catcher. He's an all-SEC player. Jake Clement's another all-SEC pitcher. So, like every Florida team, they have the talent, and now they're starting to put it together. Their team's gelling, and they're getting some chemistry. So, not a team you want to face if you're Ole Miss. But if that's the hand you're dealt, go take advantage of it, man. Go win that game, lock up the host, and let's go play some baseball in June, Cam.
Absolutely. And like I said, like you said, that win locks up a host against Florida. They're in the fight along with Ole Miss to get a host. You probably see one of those guys because I'm assuming the Florida on Tuesday will probably roll out one of their relief guys or midweek guys to play South Carolina. If they get that win, we'll probably see one of their guys, Aiden King, Liam Peterson, one of those guys, because as if you watch college baseball this past weekend, all the series in the SEC started on Thursday. So that gives all the Thursday and Friday starters, game one starters, 6 days rest if they want to start their first game on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it is. So you're probably going to see Hunter Elliott for Ole Miss. You're probably going to see Florida's best guy. It's going to be like a Friday night probably on a Wednesday in the SEC tournament. That seems like the way that these probably teams are going to go about that, especially with given they've got almost a week rest between start of a series to the start of the SEC tournament. So I'm excited to see what Ole Miss is going to do in this tournament. I'm excited to see what Ole Miss softball is going to do out in Fayetteville. Is going to be a pretty interesting weekend for Ole Miss baseball and Ole Miss softball. Ole Miss baseball will play on March 21st. I'll be down in Hoover covering that. I'll head down there on Wednesday and get there just before the game. The game starts at 4:30 p.m. Like we said, they'll face either South Carolina or Florida. Ole Miss is the 7th seed in that tournament. If they win, they'll play Arkansas. That'll be on Friday, I believe, and won't be till 3 p.m. on Friday. So if you don't get to make it to that first game and Ole Miss wins the first game, consider going to Hoover for the weekend. It's about 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes from Oxford. A lot of Ole Miss fans, I've been there before, a lot of Ole Miss fans seem to travel well there when we go to the SEC tournament. Ole Miss has won that tournament before. It can be done. And if you win that tournament, I mean, no telling where Ole Miss would be at. Ole Miss probably would be around the 8 to 9 range of hosting. I mean, you win that tournament and pretty much you're carving your own path at that point. So pretty exciting stuff that Ole Miss baseball is doing right now. I know we've joked about them all year, joked about things that they've done wrong, and criticized things that they've done wrong as a fan base, as reporters, whatever that is. But this is an Ole Miss baseball team that no one expected to be in the situation they're in right now. No one expected they'd be 7th in the conference, above Tennessee, the team that they lost players to, and in the situation that they are right now with a chance to host baseball in Oxford for the first time, I believe, since 2021. I think was the last time there was a regional in Oxford. So it's been a good while since we've seen playoff baseball in Oxford, and I think that's something that we're looking forward to as Ole Miss fans, as Ole Miss reporters in general. I think that's something that we're looking forward to, is having playoff baseball back at Swayze Field where it really belongs. Swayze Field is one of the best facilities in the country. I always want to see playoff baseball at Swayze Field. I think that's all we got for you guys. Is that all you got, Zach?
Yes, sir, man. Let's get some wins. How about it?
Let's get some wins. I think that's all we got for you guys today, though. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a comment to keep up with the videos, subscribe to me and Zach on social media, subscribe to the Rebel Walk on social media, and as always, be sure to tune into the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs.